Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and this one's going to be an interesting one, I think, for a lot of people that don't understand what really happened in what I would call the kind of like the bridge, okay, between the era of lone gunman political assassinations at the presidential level and the gun legislation that would be related to that, okay, into this new phenomena of lone shooters everywhere, right? And the idea of psychotropic drugs within the intelligence community. Because one of the things that really needs to be discussed about MK Ultra that's almost never ever discussed is it was way more than just LSD. There was a thing called depatterning. And at the end of the day, a lot of these institutions were working with hand in hand, not only the military industrial complex, but big pharma as well. And I would, number one, encourage people, again, in this same kind of 60s, 70s, into the 80s era, check out Jim Jones for real, okay, and see the kind of drugs that they were using there. And really how a lot of stuff that they were studying via MK Ultra, they later utilized in other programs that would go beyond this. And why are we bringing it up? We're bringing it up because John Hinckley Jr., okay, the man that attempted to assassinate Reagan, was just confirmed for unconditional release. He's out. It's over, okay? And in my film Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, we have a subsection. We're going to play it. But instead of just playing it from that part, we're going to play a section of the George H.W. Bush part, right? And George H.W. Bush publicly, the head of the CIA, just before he runs against Reagan in a presidential election. So we're going to give you some of the Reagan history, but then we're going to show you that actually the Hinckleys and the Bushes knew each other. So, you know, in a time where basically Sirhan has been exonerated, right? Let's bring that up live. It's not something I had to plan on bringing up per se. Sirhan vindicated. Let's see if we get that. Okay. Let's see. Did they deny him parole? Maybe he wasn't. So he was denied parole again in January. Okay. I guess, but the RFK family issues a statement on that. Let's talk about that right there. His refusal to admit the truth makes it impossible to conclude that he has overcome the evil that boiled over 53 years ago. Huh. Really? Relief for Sirhan. Okay, so I guess I was wrong on that. I could have swore that Robert Kennedy met with him. But then again, I'm doing Google searches on the fly here, okay? So what I really want to bring up is he's been around for a while. Like, he's been out. He has his own YouTube channel, okay? It's monetized. He's singing songs on YouTube, all right? They got 40,000, 90,000 views. And I got to ask, okay? You know, he's already basically lived, he had the weekend program. We covered it while I was on InfoWars. And then he was living with his family. And now he's going to be living by himself unconditionally. And one of the big things is, when I talk about these mass shootings, they always come with legislation. And this is from the infamous Brady Bill. Okay, the very beginnings of the background checks, right? Now, ask yourself what kind of drugs this guy was on. Whether or not there's the possibility there's something more to this. And what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to play these clips right here.
Longer-standing relationship.
There are indications that he had relations to the CIA before. There's a very strange memo, and the names are George Bush. And when this was published, there was a lot of fuzzing of the issues, but given George H.W. Bush's strong connections with the Cuban community, I think there is a good chance that it was the George Bush we know, so that he did have a CIA connection.
Bush left the CIA just under a year after his appointment. He is credited with restoring the agency's morale, as its image was being shattered by the Church Committee's revelations of the CIA's unauthorized activities involving assassinations and corruption. In reality, Bush was responsible for denying the Church Committee many of the documents it requested and making it impossible for them to do a thorough investigation. After his time as CIA director, he devoted himself to becoming the next president of the United States.
And, before this, I want to reiterate that he was also a UN ambassador during the Nixon administration. Think about that. Kissinger, the UN, very close ties to China. I mean, Bush is somebody we really need to look at again.
Many people within his own party did not like his globalist ties.
Along the campaign trail, Bush continually had to explain his association with the group.
J.R. Ewing in the show Dallas. J.R. is a member of the Trilateral Commission, I think. It's got to be because it's so bad.
Well, again, the Trilateral Commission is another creation of Rockefeller, of Brzezinski. You can read in their own writings that it came to fruition when the Bilderberg Group would not accept the Asian power structure, the Japanese power structure, into their meetings initially.
Let me tell you something. I used to be a member of it. I resigned, as I did from every business thing I was in, to concentrate on one thing, running for president of the United States.
Ronald Reagan initially had no interest in having Bush as his running mate.
Even then presidential candidate Ronald Reagan had questions.
I would suggest that maybe Mr. Bush would clear the air if he'd tell us why he resigned.
Reagan's backers then forced him to choose their intelligence frontman, George H.W. Bush, as his vice president.
But in spite of last year's campaign rhetoric, all seems to be back to normal between George Bush and his old colleagues. And President Reagan, who is relying on many of these powerful business leaders to make his economic package work, will host commission representatives at the White House Monday.
After Reagan's election, there was an attempt on his life, just 69 days into office. Astoundingly, Bush would again be connected.
So just who is John Hinckley Jr.?
When he left this neighborhood 8 years ago, he was, by all accounts, well-liked and seemingly normal.
This donut shop near the motel was visited by Hinckley, who reportedly waited for a phone call here each day.
So let's start there. Where's the investigation? Who's he talking to at a phone booth every day? What's going on?
Even though he had a phone in his motel room.
And he had a phone in his motel room. No big deal. There it is. There's a question that's never, ever asked. If there wasn't something else going on here, if all these coincidences are just coincidences, why don't we know more?
The nature of the calls is not known.
A touch of irony. The young man walking with the elder Hinckley is 30-year-old Scott Hinckley, John Jr.'s brother. He and Vice President Bush's son, Neil, are friends. They had planned to have dinner together in Denver tonight. The plans have been canceled.
We were told Hinckley was a madman acting alone. If that was the case, why was he making phone calls from a payphone down the road instead of his hotel room? Why was the would-be assassin's brother a family friend of the man who stood to gain the presidency? While Reagan led the nation in the public eye, Bush exploited his power through the largely unknown Continuity of Government Directive.
And that's where, I think I'm going to bring some of this to the Clay Clark Reawaken America tour right here, because that's where I start getting into the National Programs Office. So I do remind people that I'm going to be out there. I am going to be speaking. I need you to share this information. Think about it again. The guy that shot a president, really did it, not talked about it, walks away a totally free man. And he's for over a decade now, this process has been out there. Okay? And it furthers the agenda of the Track Trace Database Society, the restrictions on firearms. And, take a look at him. You don't think he was on any kind of drugs at all? I'd love to know, John, if you were not taking any drugs at all. No, none of these new psychotropic drugs. I'd love to know who you were talking to when you were at that donut shop. I'd love to know if you remember any of it, really. Just questions. Thumbs it up, subscribe, and share. We are on Podbean, Rockfin, Rumble. We're doing it all right now. I need your support. Buy me a coffee. Consider it $5, $10, $15. It means the world to me. I think that Occult Priestess, thank you so much, said Alistair Crowley Bush. That's funny. We're not going to get into any of that. But check out the documentary films and share them as well for free. Loose Change Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order to Find and Shade the Motion Picture. Not my most polished broadcast, folks, but an interesting one for, I hope, new viewers who don't understand that a lot of this stuff is very, very interconnected. It's not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I love you guys, and I'll see you on the flip side.